Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Teacher Tales on Tuesday. Before we name ourselves, I want to name this place and acknowledge our position of privilege on the traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq and the Beothuk and the present-day lands of the Mi'kmaq, the Innu and the Inuit. A land acknowledgement recognizes the longer history, reaching beyond colonization and the history of European colonies. And it upholds the significance of all Indigenous peoples who live and continue to live in this place. In the days and weeks and months and years ahead, we have so many opportunities to move forward in reflection, action, and reconciliation with Indigenous communities as we seek ways to heal our hearts and minds together. I'll also invite everyone to just take a moment and think about our place of privilege in this troubled old world. If we can just do that for a moment. Thank you. So welcome to Teacher Tales on Tuesday. And I want to say my name is Jan Bewley, and I'm fortunate enough to offer classes in literacy and drama education and art education at MUN's Faculty of Education. I'm delighted to have you, the four of you, on the screen tonight, and lots of people out in Cyberland, as we reflect on 100 years of teacher education in Newfoundland and Labrador, where we have been, where we are presently, and where we hope to grow. Tonight, I have some questions for each of you to consider, and I'll call on individuals to respond so we all have a chance to share, and everybody out in Cyberland hears from you. And the Teacher Tales on Tuesday are also being recorded, so there are people tuning into the conversation right now, and it'll be live on Facebook, and people will be able to hear. So let's get started. I'd like to just have you introduce yourselves, tell us where you are seated tonight, and how many years you have been teaching. Let's start with Paul. Hi, Paul Murphy. You can leave your mute button off if you like, and we can just be live, so we don't even have to wait. Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Sure, sounds great. Well, hello everyone in Cyberland. My name is Paul Murphy. I've been a school teacher. I guess I started in about 2008. I think I graduated that spring, and I started substitute that year. Since then, I've worked in Trepassey on Bell Island, and now this year I'm at Paradise Intermediate. I'm a music teacher. I've taught music K to 12. I've taught most things in the K to 6 system. Done a lot of work with special needs at school, the library. Life as a teacher, it's a little bit of everything. Yeah. So this year is just music. It's great.
Great, thank you. Flora, tell us about you. Where are you teaching these days?
Well, I'm in Admirals Academy in CBS. And my teaching career started about 20 years ago. It actually started in Athens, Greece, which inspired a love of teaching. And that brought me back home and out in Calgary, Alberta, where I taught English as a second language and special ed and early literacy. And here back home, I, with Paul at Stella Maris, haven't taught with Paul, but I've been in Trepassey at Stella Maris, teaching multi-age, teaching early literacy, teaching special ed at the time. And then from there, I went out to Holy Cross in Holyrood. From there, I met Susan George and went out to Whitburn Elementary. And then I came back in CBS to St. George's Elementary. I went up to Upper Gullies Elementary, and now at Admirals Academy in CBS. Oh, wow. So now I'm a department head for special services at Admirals, and work with complex needs kids and provide literacy support, math support in the classroom.
Great. Oh, welcome, Flora. Super.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be here.
Nice. we're going to head way over to Labrador and hear from John Murphy. John, tell us about where you are, first of all, and a little bit about where you have been teaching.
Well, thanks, and thank you for including me. I feel honored. And I taught most of my life at Nain, but I've also taught in Makkovik 2 different times, and I taught here in Happy Valley for 2 years.
Wow.
So, but mostly at Nain.
And all grades, John?
Well, I did when I substituted. Most of my teaching was with grade 3 and grade 4.
The best.
But then when I retired in 2000, I substituted with every grade from pre-kindergarten to grade 12.
Super.
And over the years, I taught many children and people from the same families. And my last year teaching, I had a student that was the 4th generation, the great grandson of one of my parents. So I'm known by, if anyone wants to know about me and thinks about me and wonders about me, just ask some 600 people and name what they thought of me, because, they know me so well. I'm like,
what a legacy. Well, thanks, John, for that. That's lovely. What a great
my big thrill is when I see my former students, not so much in the winter, but many come down off the North Coast to go to the hospital, and they see me on the road, and they'll wave. I asked one of them, "How did you know it was me so far away?" "Oh, it's just the way you walk." Whatever that is. I'm always wondering, what way do I walk?
They know you. Jessica. Thanks, John. Jessica, tell us about your teaching and learning journey.
Well, actually, John, you're making me think, because I have the privilege right now. I'm working with some former students, but my son is now in grade 9 at the school where I taught for 20 years, and his new science teacher is also one of my former students. So that's pretty special. And I wasn't going to be a teacher in a classroom. It's just funny. But I wasn't, I didn't get into education and do my education degree thinking I was ever going to be in a classroom. I was going to do other things with my education degree. I was into outdoor and experiential education. But when I came back to Newfoundland, and I didn't have any intention of being back in Newfoundland. I was going to come here for the summer after education and then head out west, and that would be it. But I got a job with the newly formed Conservation Corps at the time. And that fall, I worked with the Brother Brennan Environmental Education Center, which is now the Echo Pond Environmental Education Center. And I was living my life of environmental and experiential education. And a couple of years later, I kind of was looking for something different. I was back with the Conservation Corps by then. And a half-time, 2-month replacement came up at my old junior high, McPherson Junior High. And I figured, well, you never know. I should test drive this. I should see if this teaching thing is really for me. Now I look back at the hubris, right? And the thinking that I was going to test drive the system. Well, they were test driving me. And I was very fortunate, because actually the person who had hired me had been overlooking the Brother Brennan Environmental Education Center. So, had worked with me before. And the principal, I didn't know it at the time, knew that he was going to need a French immersion science teacher the next year. So it wasn't me test driving them. It was them test driving me. So worked there for 2 years until it closed as a junior high. And then I moved to St. Paul's, where I spent a very happy couple of decades teaching junior high French immersion science. Wow. And just loved it, because I have an absolute passion for teaching science. And then about 5 years ago, I got the opportunity to switch over to the school district in Safe and Inclusive Schools. And just loved that. Had about 30 schools that I visited, and to help implement our Safe and Caring Schools policy. And then I got a very strange phone call just over a year ago saying, "Hey, would you like to come and work at the Department of Education?" And somebody gave me a very good sales pitch. And so I've been at the department for about a year now. It started last February and was there for a week before we all shut down and went home. Yeah. So I still feel like a total newbie there. But that's kind of my path to where I am now.
That's a great journey. Jessica. Thanks for that. Well, what a rich evening we've got ahead, and I'll keep an eye on the time. We're fierce about ending at 8:45, so people can go and have a cup of tea and go to bed. I want to invite all of you to think back to your early days of teaching and what kept you there? What kept you going? And I'm going to start with you, John. If you could share with us those early days, you didn't quit, you kept going. What is it about the teaching profession that pulled you in?
Well, I think it was it was the people at Maine itself. And it was just so wonderful, I was young and I wanted to try to make a life for myself. And the people were just so open to, well, what do you want to be doing? Or, it wasn't like, who are you? Where are you from? We're going to categorize you. We'll put you in your place. We'll understand you. Oh, no, it was just, friendly. I could see they were very observant people and they were watching every move I made, but it wasn't like they prejudged me. So it was a real chance to make a life for myself. And I was trained to be a science teacher, but when I got to Nain, all the high school students were sent out to the boarding school.
Oh.
So, and that I was one of the last of the, denominational school system teachers.
Wow.
I was hired by Reverend Peacock, who was head of the Moravian Church in Labrador, but he was also in charge of the schools in Labrador. Wow. And so that's how I came to Nain from being hired by him. How it all happened was my grandfather was a country doctor on the prairie of Illinois in Midwest U.S., and he had heard about Grenfell, who traveled around the U.S. giving lectures and promoting his mission.
Right.
And he always wanted to work with him. And so my mother really was the one who organized my escape from the Midwest. She took me to Boston, to the Grenfell International Center. And so I went to Northwest River in the summer of 1959 as a volunteer. And there I met the principal from Nain, and he was running the boarding school in the summer. And we canoed a lot on Grand Lake. And he said, well, if you love Labrador so much, why don't you come back and teach at Nain? So I went back and I decided that's what I'd do. And I went to University of Wisconsin and, majored in as general science teacher.
Yeah.
And I read every book I could find in the University of Wisconsin library on Labrador, because I was determined. And 4 years later, I showed up at Nain.
What an amazing story, John, how you found your way there. Wow. That's incredible.
And I met my wife there and our family there. And so that's been my life. And
the welcome mat sounds like it was big, and they took your heart and said, we want you to stay. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I really felt it was an incredible change in my life, that I could actually make my own life. And there were people that would help me do it.
Yeah.
Wow, how beautiful.
Such a rich story. I often wonder, how did people get joy? And, born down there and up in Labrador, changing the lives of, thousands over the course of period. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Great story.
And how you meet people along the way who pull you in different directions. Flora, tell us about how your early days kept you in the teaching profession. What was it about that job?
Well, I wondered, for a while, like, what is it that really brought me to teaching? Because initially, when my parents decided to move to Canada, like most Greek background people, restaurant business is the way they go.
Yeah.
And that's how we pretty much transitioned to Canada. And in the beginning, I really couldn't understand what drew me to teaching. So I thought about it more and realized really, I believe it was my parents. Without consciously, like as the years passed, I realized that it was actually seeing my parents struggle with the language. And it was seeing my mother pick up the newspaper and try to teach herself. They used to always get the newspaper delivered to their house every day for over 30 years that they were there on this street. And they pretty much taught themselves. And I saw them struggle so much and wanted to help so much. So I had an opportunity of, after high school, going to Greece for a year and teaching English to Greek people, like business people because English is the second language there. So then it was just speaking. The only qualification was you had to speak English. So that's where I started. So I decided to come back home and get my degree. And from coming back home, the plan, life takes you in different directions. So, got married, ended up in Calgary for about 10 years. So I started my degree in Newfoundland, but finished in Calgary, Alberta. But that also gave me another experience of culture and seeing really what was it that was drawing me. It wasn't even like it was a choice of mine. It was like something was drawing me to it. And the more I got involved and the more I taught even, people coming to Canada and struggling with the language themselves, it brought back reflections of my own family struggling and trying to teach themselves. And that kind of gave me a drive with literacy. And I got really passionate, and dug right into early literacy in Calgary and was fortunate to learn like with people, mentors, like, that were associated with Miriam Traherne at the time and were really big on literacy with Guy Supernell and Richard Allington and all these gurus in literacy. And then the conferences there, and it just really became stronger and stronger. And then I decided to come back home. And it has just, I haven't looked back, as they say, but it was the initial drive. Like I'll never forget around the kitchen table every day, the newspaper coming and my parents struggling with the language. But their belief was, it's just you work hard. You just work hard at whatever you do. And education was really important. So that gave me the push and the drive. And that's where I am now.
Beautiful, Flora. You've reminded me of, I don't usually contribute to the evening except as the facilitator here, but I'm thinking about my mother who always used to say that your thumb is shaped this way for a reason, that you move on. You move on past all those challenges. And I love that. So she'd be happy to know. She'd be 100 this year if she was living. And lots of pearls of wisdom.
Yes.
Let's zip over to Paul. Are there teachers in your family, Paul, that inspired you to stay, or how did you get hooked on this profession?
Well, to be honest, I think I don't know. Well, my father was a teacher. My mother was an educator as well. And I spent a lot of time sailing as a child. I was really fortunate. We had an old wooden schooner.
Wow.
And yeah, we used to take tourists out and that sort of thing. And really, Dad was really big on, heritage and keeping things going. So that was the summer thing. And I guess, I was the sibling that, go make sure your father comes back on, just keeping safe out on the boat, keep the boat going but I mean, so there were always stories of Newfoundland culture, question the world, what's happening in the news. Did you listen to the Open Line show, which as a child drove me absolutely insane? But it was one of those houses. Yeah, education was expected of us, of myself and my siblings, to make sure that you were educated, you know, till someday be gainfully employed. But it had to be something that was meaningful. There's always something, you know, you want to do something that you give back. I can't say for sure when the love for teaching started. I think at a young age, to be honest, I have two younger brothers, and I learned a lot about teaching and people, actually, just being the older brother, to be honest. And I always knew I wanted to do it. At school, you know, we remember those great teachers that we had. We all just, you know, if you don't get it their way, it's just wrong. And I questioned a lot of the system as well as an early age. And to this day in my teaching practice, you know, my personality, everything, I really have a lot of strong takeaways that I got from those, you know, great teachers. And that's from kindergarten, you know, through the end of graduate studies and that sort of thing. And at the same time, I always remember the not so great ones, because there were a lot of lessons to learn. And I used to see how other kids would be treated at school. So say for example, you know, I became a music teacher, but, you know, this idea of it almost being elitist, you know, you can't sing, everybody close their eyes. If you get a pat on the head, then I want you to lip sync the words. And it's crushing to children. You know, and Susan Choir is the example. You know, you could apply this to any course. And I just used to think, my gosh, like, how are you positively contributing to society, to empowering somebody, to make someone believe in themselves? Maybe, yes, some people might have to work a little harder, but that's where we get creative in education. Mm-hmm. How do we get all these kids, you know, because they don't learn the same way, you know. That's why we have to differentiate instruction constantly, you know. But yeah, I always thought about that. And then I taught private music lessons, and I taught Sea Cadets, marching bands, and that for a while, you know. And you could see students kind of be intrigued by student interest, their motivation, what gets them going as well. And I think that's vitally important when we're in our education practice. You know, rule number one, you need to know your audience. Yeah. There has to be a way that you can, you know, pull them in. So I taught private lessons for a long time. I learned a lot about that. Also, being a musician, I wanted to go and tour and do the musician thing for a while. Because I always knew that I was passionate about education. I was passionate about teaching. I don't mind all the work that we do. Mm-hmm. I really don't. Because again, you know, like all of us here, we're passionate about what we do. But yeah, you know, it was important for me to kind of get that done, and great experiences to pass on to students. But most importantly, sit back and be very comfortable where I am, you know, and how things, you know, life progresses. Let's say, you know, happy accidents happen all the time. And I'm really pleased with the way things worked out. You know, teach kids, take a chance on yourself. You're nervous, I get it. Take a breath. You got it, you know. And
I like how you've talked about your accumulated experiences and things. Jessica, how about you? What has kept you there and drawn you in?
I was thinking about it. Two things, and number two first. My colleagues. Mm-hmm. I've had a lot of mentors in education, and a lot of colleagues and friends. And as I said, my first teaching job was in my old junior high. So a number of the teachers had taught me. Mm-hmm. About half the staff was still the same. And it was very odd going into the staff room that first time. But getting to know them as adults rather than, you know, from a student lens, it was wonderful. And I just tried to soak up what I could from their experiences and learn from them. And then, I had the good fortune to be in the same school for quite a long period of time. And so, some of the colleagues there, they're friends. And so we kept each other going. Yeah. And I think that motivation and finding other, I have one of my closest friends, we call each other brain twins because, similar positions in different schools, but we fed off each other, collaborating with teachers, not just in my own school, but across the province. Mm-hmm. That was really big. But the number one thing that kept me in education was the students. It had to be the students. Mm-hmm. And I found junior high. I just kind of fell into junior high, and that was my place. And I hope that teachers find the place where they need to be. When my son was in kindergarten, I had the year off on deferred, and I went and volunteered in his class once a week. I found out that I could not have been a kindergarten teacher. Flora, my hat is off to you. But junior high, I loved the students' energy and their enthusiasm. And in science, I figured that, well, if we could turn them on to a love of science in junior high, maybe then we've got them for life. Mm-hmm. It kept me young and silly too. We could do things together. We could do, water cycle dances. We could bounce around like molecules. But what I love most about junior high is that students, they come in grade 7, they leave at grade 9, and through that time, they're figuring out who they are. And I think about it like people trying on different wardrobes. They're trying to figure out what fits. And so the way I look at it is, particularly a junior high teacher, because, tumultuous years, my role in all that is to support them as they try on different things. Mm-hmm. And then if they find something that fits, that's great. That looks great on you. Hope you keep it. And if they say, yeah, you know what, this isn't me. Well, we have to give them the space to take it off and leave it behind and not say, well, you used to wear that, so that's you. Yeah. We've got to help, we've got to be the support as people find their way. And so all these amazing developing humans, I'm just so lucky because I know I have learned more from my students than they ever learned from me.
Yeah. And aren't we lucky to love both of you, I'm going to ask you to ponder for a moment. Thanks, Jessica. I want you to think back to a student who did just that. A student who you can make up a name for that student because we'll protect confidentiality here, but tell us a little bit about what that student did to shape or flip your mind or disrupt your thinking. Maybe it's a student who came back years later. It's somebody who you think about. I think about a little girl whose sister was missing this part of her finger. And she wrote on behalf of her sister to the Del Monte Fruit Cup Company and said, my little sister can't open those up the way I do. I wonder if you could make that ring a little easier to pull for little kids. And I still think about Bridget, and she wrote to the Del Monte Fruit Cup Company, and they changed the way those open. That was a child in Halifax, and that's a kid that continues to be in my heart. I think about her, and I think I provided the paper and the marker, and she wrote the letter. We looked up the address, and so that's a kid that changed me to think about how kids can change the world. So I'm going to start with you, Flora. If you could tell us about that student, that learner who you still think about. What did they do and what did you learn from that learner?
Well, it's interesting because it ties into the question, why did you get into teaching? And as I was trying to figure out, what is this drive? What is it? What is this magnet that's pulling me towards it? Because again, I could have ventured out to a different profession. And after high school, I got into banking thinking that that was my thing, but I just kept being pulled into teaching. And through my travels and coming back home, at one of the schools that I was assigned, I was a grade 1 teacher that year. And the kindergarten teacher came and she said, oh, this little person, I'm really worried about her. She's presenting like special needs and she really needs a lot of help. And I'm not really sure what we're going to do and kind of have her priority because she's going to need some help right away. So she came to the class, and about a month or so into the year, there was no progression like for language, and there was no progression at all. She was a very shy, timid child. And I could not understand why she wasn't progressing until one day her parent came to pick her up and started talking to her and realized that this child that's born in Canada that had a Canadian name, first name, but was of Asian background, really at home, her first language was Mandarin. So it was like the same experience that I had when I first came to Canada, and I was plunked in the classroom with no English as a second language background for the teachers, like no fault of the teachers. There was just no people that were really foreigners in Newfoundland, you know, and we were kind of one of the first generation of foreigners. So they really didn't know what to do with us. And because we couldn't speak, it kind of presented as complex needs, special needs. And so this is what this little girl was presenting. And as soon as I heard her talk to her father, I'm like, oh my goodness, her first language is not English. And that brought me right back to my childhood and my challenges. And I said, oh my goodness, this child is only, and at that time, coming out from kindergarten, which was only half day, then coming into grade 1 for a full day, but half day only being exposed to English and then going right back into the home with the Mandarin language. This is why she wasn't progressing. And then once we discovered that, and it really brought me back, like reflecting to my struggles and how I was learning and what we needed to do as teachers and promote the English as a second language. Well, once we discovered that, and then we got an English as a second language teacher in and supplemented her learning and, you know, exposed her to more materials that she needed and connected the home to the school. It created more of a sense of belonging to her. And it goes back to what Paul was saying, like you really got to hook them in and create that sense of belonging and making them feel accepted and valued and understanding where they come from. Is kind of like Maya Angelou's quote, they'll never remember what you taught them or said or whatever, but they'll remember how you made them feel. So that's the thing for me. And in my classroom, even today, because of the feeling that I experience, because of the feeling that I see of other kids struggling, like this little girl, especially if English is not your first language, that sense of belonging and acceptance and into a community and then smaller into the classroom, beginning into the classroom, like really making them feel belonged, like they belong and they're valued and they're like you hear what they're saying and what they say is important and you see them. Really, that's, again, going back to this little girl, like taking the time to actually get to know this little person, get to know the background, get to know the family. And it really does take a village in the end. So that is my memory that I take forward. And most importantly, besides anything else, if there is no sense of belonging in the classroom, then that's not going to jumpstart their learning. So again, it's the foundation of acceptance, belonging. You're a part of this, you're important. And for me as a foreigner coming into a new country, a new province, a language, all of the experiences, it was the champions in my life that made me feel accepted and valued and gave me the courage to continue and become an educator myself. So it's kind of, that year became full circle for me. And I carry that memory with me ever since.
I wonder where she is now, Flora, that little girl.
Yes, I wonder too. Yeah.
John, let's zip over to you. Can you think back to a student who taught you something?
Yeah, I was thinking, but before you said the screen behind you, who painted it?
Do you know what? We got this at an auction.
I think it's beautiful.
John,
yeah.
Isn't it lovely? And it hides my messy office behind me. Yeah. Isn't it beautiful? It is lovely. It's very calming.
Yeah. I mean, I had this idea of possibly making a career with art, with landscape painting, with oils, but it never happened. And at any rate, so then I was thinking with our children, I didn't really like all that, the fumes of the turpentine and that. So I got interested in Chinese ink painting, which only uses, a bamboo brush and an ink stone. If there's no smells or anything. So I've been doing that for now about 50 years. So at any rate, thinking back, it's sort of a grim story to tell, but I think it shows something about teaching, that teachers can't do everything. And there's nothing wrong for a teacher to say, I need help. And if you don't get it from your administration in your school, then go anywhere you can to find some help with the problem you faced. There was a boy that came down to Nain, Inuit boy, came down from northern Quebec. And he was in my class, in the grade 4 class. And there was a lot of problems right off. And I mean, it was to the point where I was spending about a fourth of my energy and time with this one student, if even more. And it was building up, and I would hold him in for detentions that never really seemed to get anywhere. And it was getting to the point that it was about ready to explode, which it did. He was in for detention, and he suddenly, I had taught science. What happened was the primary teachers, they all didn't really like teaching science. So I love teaching science. So I found this cart down in the basement of the school, and I had a cart, and I would go to their classes to teach science. And then they would come to my class teaching something they were interested in. Like there was a fellow from England who loved the ancient churches of England, and he hiked around to visit them and had all these photographs. Some teachers sort of put him down as he's always telling his grade 2 about the churches in England. But, the truth was the kids loved it. They found it so fascinating. They had never seen buildings like that. I always feel that every teacher does have something special to give their students. And there should be more cooperation. I believed a lot in that teachers should work together. But at any rate, this boy arrived and things were not going well. And finally, one day with detention after school, it just exploded. But because I had been teaching science, there were shelves, metal shelves on 2 walls going all the way up almost to the ceiling that were all filled with things I had made to teach science. Because when I first came to Nain, the school had almost no sort of things like that. So I would make models of, experimental things. Like I made a 2-cycle, I'm not at all mechanical, but I had a book and I made a two-cycle combustion engine out of cardboard to show the children how a snowmobile operates. because they were transitioning from dog teams to snowmobiles. And so, trying to help them, I always feel like you take their world. Yeah. What really inspired me in my teaching career was Sylvia Ashton Warner, who taught Maori children in New Zealand.
Right.
And then when I was in university in the 60s, I read her book, Teacher, and she described her methods. And I was totally amazed. And that's really, I've been following her all my career of teaching, was all the different things she would do. Her idea was you don't take a funnel and pour information into the child's head. You take their world and then you give them the confidence to expand their world. And it comes from them, not you. Their curiosity. Your main goal is to incite their curiosity and desire to learn themselves. Any rate, so when this fellow arrived, I could see it's a very different situation than, I'd had with the students at Nain. When I came to Nain at first, it was by far the most exciting place in the whole town. And we used to get films from National Film Board, and parents used to ask me if they could come to school to watch the films because we had the best movies in town. It was, they just loved school. So I was not used to somebody that hated school. And at any rate, one of his friends said that he had been abused by an older woman teacher with white hair. Now, I, of course, never wanted to know anything more about her than that. At least I knew sort of what I was up against. But at any rate, back to this session after school, he just lunged and grabbed the stuff on the wall, on the shelves, and just dragged it down on the ground, glass smashing, my little experimental things, models and stuff, all, on the ground. And I just stood there sort of in disbelief. And I'm not inclined to lose my temper. I don't know why. It's just my nature. So I just stood there. And then he moved on to the next shelf and started dragging it all down. Wow. And I was just to the point, like, I don't know what to do. I do not know what to do. I'll just take it and he'll get it out of his system and then everything will be good again. That was what was running through my mind. Well, he went through the walls, the two walls, everything ended up dragged down. Then he started tipping over desks. All the books went flying out of the desk. The floor was covered with around 1 foot of stuff.
Wow.
And then I just stood there. I mean, there was nothing more for him to smash or mess up. And I just looked at him and said, "You can go home now." That's all I did. I mean, any rate, I think from that story, I feel that teachers, I knew something was coming where I was way over my head. I should have tried to get help wherever I could, even like to go to the clinic and talk to the head nurse there, to see, what could be done for him.
Did he come back to school, John?
Oh, yeah, he did.
Yeah.
And things, he more or less had done all, he'd gone as far as he could possibly go besides attacking me. He didn't, but, I don't know what could have. But what was interesting, after I retired in 2000, I was working at the group home. I was moonlighting there. I was substituting when they needed me because I was about the only teacher qualified, to be a substitute or, former teacher or person in the town. So they needed me. So often I was, but I also was moonlighting in the group home. And everything went very well there because I learned with teenagers, the way to their hearts is through their stomach. And I learned how to cook everything they liked, pizzas, donuts, we always worked in pairs with two people.
Yeah.
And I learned Newfoundland style cooking. I know all about that. I know Inuit style cooking. I learned teenage cooking.
That's a great story.
This fellow showed up at the group home.
Oh.
And of course I thought, like my reaction was, oh, what's going to happen now? He was just so happy to see me, so friendly, and doing anything I would, be doing, he would want to help me. But I think it went back to the fact that, it seemed like I was a total loser at the time, with my interaction with him. I totally failed, I thought. But, in a way, maybe it somehow meant something to him that I didn't get angry. That was probably maybe what it was. I didn't, it was just, I don't know. It's just my nature.
It's a beautiful story, John.
But I think it does.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just feel like my main point is that teaching, you can't take on this attitude that you can do everything for all your students. You have a wide range of students. They each have their own different needs. You can't think that you can provide every need. You can solve everyone's problem. It was a humbling experience, but I just like to pass that on, that there's nothing wrong with saying, I need help.
Yeah, that's beautiful, John. Thank you for that story. I know we're a little over, but there's no way I'm stopping this. This is so incredible. Paul, let's hear from you. Have you got a student that comes to mind in your head and heart?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just kind of a similar story to what John was saying. It sort of reminded me of something. So, like I mentioned earlier, my parents were teachers. So, one thing that I was taught long before, I don't even know how old I was, junior high maybe. And I remember my dad saying, Paul, don't ever forget that it's the whole child that comes to school and not just the student. And to always remember that, and one of these things, you kind of pride your not. And this one school that I was at had this particular student. They were known to flare up, act up, get really violent. Like nothing to pick up a chair, desk, throw it at you, trying to jump out the windows, off their head, and started getting physical and shoving and all this kind of stuff. And said to this kid, just because it was just the two of us there, I said, what's up? Like, what's up? I know, I had a feeling, things weren't all that great at home and this kind of thing. And anyway, just kind of keep it brief. He just snapped around and he said, do you have any idea what's going on? And I said, listen, buddy, no, I don't. Like, I thought that I had an idea. Anyway, then I found out that, father was in and out of jail and this sort of thing. And then when he was out of jail, he was sort of an absent parent who just kind of show up every now and then. And he said, do you ever wonder why I get so worked up and all this stuff? He's like, everybody's trying to give me pills, or trying to get me to do this, trying to get me to do that, trying to get me to do this, and at the end, there's, again, like John was saying, you can't save them all. And there's not, it was not my position I can't fix that. But then, like Jessica said too, as well, to be there for them, to help them figure out the world, just a little sounding board, and he called everybody, everything in the book. And then afterwards, I came by, swung by my classroom and said, hey, listen, sir, I want to say thanks for just listening, and all that kind of stuff is just going really rough. And I just said, listen, anytime you need to come down, and, open door policy. So it was great to have students, but it's funny how we take it for granted. Sometimes we think we know what's going on, but we don't always know. And I guess it was just a little reminder of that. Yeah. But on an upside, I had another student that she was absolutely wonderful. great student, private lesson, actually. This isn't even school, play the drums and this sort of thing. And again, you want to inspire students to believe in themselves. And I just got a letter, I think it was just last year. She sent me off an email, and she just finished her graduate studies in physics, I believe. Anyway, she's working for the Canada Space Agency. And she, she said, Paul, I just wanted to say thank you so much. I was so shy, cracked me out of my shell, really got me going on the right path and feeling that I could do this. And it's like, it's great. I get along with people and I'm doing all this. And by the way, all the science nerds think it's totally cool that I play the drums. She knows my kids are right in science. We love it here at the house. So it was nice to get those nice little feedback kind of thing, But, when a student takes a point to say, thanks. Even though what I was teaching her was not had anything at all to do with science. But like she said, you taught me about life, how do we get in around and find that path? And so that was very, very powerful. Never underestimate the little things that we go through day to day. They don't always seem like a big deal at the moment, but to that kid, 10 years down the road, they're going to go, by the way, I got into this because that day you blah, blah, something, right? And it's the best feeling in the world. It's great. Great.
You never know.
There you go. That's my story. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Jessica, a student that changed you.
Well, I'm just thinking, Paul, I've got a little pile of cards and things that students have sent and emails that they just, anytime I'm having a really terrible day, that's where I go. And Paul and John, you've really spoken about that empathy piece and being trauma sensitive and just understanding that kids, everybody, not just the students, the adults, we're all coming in to school with stuff. And so if we just spend a bit more time tapping into a little bit of empathy, I think we'd be in a better place. And Flora, you were speaking about, getting to know the students and belonging and that safety and acceptance. And I think schools have to be a place where, where when you mess up, you still belong, that we still, we pull you back in. It's not like we're pushing you back out. So in terms of students who've really made an impact, Flora talked about Maya Angelou. Well, one of my favorite quotes is one of Maya Angelou's as well. When you know better, you do better. And so it's kind of a tale of two students and an evolution of me as a teacher. So I think in my early career, I was more of a rule follower, and I was more of I was trying to do things the way that they had been done. And you're a little awkward when you're in your early career. You follow along. Mm-hmm. And I have a student, and I'll call him Tim because I've never taught a Tim before. But Tim sits on one of my shoulders. And Tim came to class every day with his winter coat on. And we had a rule. You didn't wear your winter coat in class. And there was, I'm sure, an explanation. It was something about a fire hazard. And I taught science, so sometimes it was a safety hazard. But, there were days that I would try and get Tim to put his coat in his locker. Some days he would just go and put it in his locker. Other days we get into a power struggle. But I was trying to have power over Tim. And it wasn't until later years, especially when I did learn more about trauma-informed teaching, trauma-sensitive environments, that I really started to think, okay, well, what purpose did that coat have for Tim? And Tim was a smaller kid at the time. No idea what he's like now. But that was Tim's armor, kind of like Brene Brown talks about, armoring up. And so when I look back at it, I think, I don't think I did him the best. I did not do the best for Tim. And I wish I could find Tim and have a conversation with Tim, but I can't, and I know better, and hopefully I do better. And so that made me think of another student I had in the last couple of years of my teaching career. I don't even know, how far back. They all just kind of, once they leave junior high, they're just this amorphous blob. But I had a student, and I'll call her June because, again, I didn't teach a June. But June came to school late pretty much every day. And I realized that I was getting pretty upset at June coming late every day and interrupting class. And she was kind of a scowly person. Science was not her favorite subject, so we didn't really have that connection. And I wasn't really clicking with June. And then one day we had a rule, three lates, and then you got a detention. Now I wasn't much into that anyway, but there was one week and June was late 3 days, and I went out in the hall, and I must have had stuff on my mind, but I stopped. And I don't know if it was the expression on June's face, or I don't know, maybe it was my student Tim who was on my shoulder. And rather than just saying, the rule is and blah, 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 and you're late again, I just stopped and I said, hey, I'm really glad you're here today. So, whenever you're ready, we're starting, but just come in and, and just fit into what we're doing. But then I looked at her and said, so I've noticed you've been late this week. Can you tell me a little bit about what's happening for you that you're late each week? And with that, she just sighed and exploded. And it turns out she was having a really hard time getting her mother to get out of the house on time. It was not this kid's fault that she was being late for school every day. There was stuff going on. And if I hadn't taken the time to ask that question, what happened, and be curious about it, rather than go on the judgmental, why are you late? Well, I wouldn't have found out what was going on under the surface. And so I'm a passionate restorative justice advocate. And that is, in my career, I think what has really helped me evolve is realizing that behavior really is communication. And if we take the time, first of all, to, in the moment, breathe and ask ourselves, what are we thinking? What are we feeling? I was annoyed she was late again, but then just to stop and turn towards the other person and just say, what's happening for you? Then I think that we have a chance to tap into that empathy that Paul and John were talking about and turn towards each other. And so I've got Tim, I'm trying to remember the names, Tim on one shoulder, I have June on another shoulder. And I just try and remember, first of all, to have that relationship with myself, to ask those questions and to check in with myself, but then also to treat everybody who's coming in as somebody has a story. And how can I help in that moment? So those are the two students who are sitting on my shoulders.
Wow. What an ending to a beautiful night, Jessica. It just reminds me of something I attended today. I was at an arts conference for people who were working with people with memory loss, with dementia and Alzheimer's. And one of the speakers talked about leaning in to find goodness and kindness. Everything. Lean in and find it. You might have to dig deep, but find it. And you've all done that tonight. Thank you for this. Nakromek. How do you say thank you in Greek?
Efcharisto.
Oh, yeah. Are there any other languages up your sleeve on the screen? Paul or Jessica? Or
I got nothing.
Miigwech, I know how to say that.
I'm 205 days into Duolingo learning German. You can learn a new language anytime. So Dankeschön.
Absolutely. Thank you all. This has been such fun. The next Teacher Tales on Tuesday, we've got two more on May 31st, the last day of May, and June 28th. And I want to really thank Morris Berry and Craig Adams and Lisa Charlong, who do the whole behind-the-scenes magic in getting this live on Facebook, for their technical and advertising assistance. And just a big, big thank you. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. This has been quite a night, a special night. I also want to say that today, a very special day, Flora, and I'm just going to say this, Flora, because I have permission from the Literacy Committee to say this. There's a very special literacy award that is launched today. The Masula Award in honor of Flora. And two lucky teachers in Newfoundland and Labrador will be able to apply for 2 awards, $1,000 worth of literacy materials for their classroom. And that is in honor of Flora's mom.
Wow. My mom would be out of her skin.
And that just went live today. And I didn't want to tell you that, Laura, because that's big news. So look online. It'll be coming your way to your Facebooks and website locations, and we'll ship those books to Labrador if somebody up there wins them, John. Absolutely. Thank you, Paul Murphy, Jessica Webb, Flora Mathiodakis.
Thank
John.
you.
Yeah, thank you.
All of you. We'll see you again soon. Keep up the great
work.
Thank you,
everybody. It's a pleasure to meet everybody.
You too.
Thanks. Take
Good
care.
night, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Jan.
Bye.